Admiral Vex Tai stared at his control panel, all four of his alien eyes blinking in complete shock. The numbers on his screen made no sense at all. His massive warship had the best technology in the galaxy, sensors that could detect a single atom from 3 star systems away. But right now those same sensors were telling him something impossible. The tiny human colony called New Busan had just sent a message that traveled through 17 different dimensions at the same time. This was like watching someone throw a rock that somehow landed on 17 different planets all at once. It shouldn't be possible. It couldn't be possible. Yet here he was, staring at proof that it had happened. Admiral Vex Tai had spent over 200 years studying every known species in the galaxy. He knew exactly what each race could and couldn't do. The humans were supposed to be babies in space terms. They had barely figured out how to leave their own solar system. Most of them were still fighting with chemical rockets and basic computers. They were like children playing with wooden blocks, while the Empire built with pure energy and folded space itself. But somehow, these same primitive humans had just accomplished something that even the Empire's greatest scientists called theoretical fantasy. His communications officer, a nervous creature with too many tentacles, was practically shaking as he delivered the next piece of information. "Sir, the transmission is coming through clearly on all frequencies. They're not threatening us or demanding we leave their space." The Admiral leaned forward in his command chair. "What are they saying then?" The communications officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "They're asking if we want to join them for dinner, sir. Something about having plenty of food and wanting to be friendly neighbors." Admiral Vex Tai felt his brain struggling to process this information. In his long military career, he had conquered 47 different worlds. Every single time, the process was the same. His fleet would arrive, demonstrate their superior firepower, and the local species would either surrender immediately or put up a desperate fight before inevitable defeat. Never, not once in 2 centuries, had anyone invited his invasion fleet to dinner. "Are you certain they understand who we are?" he asked slowly. "Yes, sir. Our ships are clearly marked with imperial symbols. Our energy signatures are unmistakable. They know exactly who they're talking to." The Admiral rubbed his temples with 2 of his hands, while the other 2 gripped his chair. "What's their current military strength? How many battle cruisers? Orbital defense platforms? Planet-killing weapons?" His tactical officer, who had been frantically running scans, looked up with an expression of pure confusion. "Sir, according to our readings, they have 2 fishing boats, 1 weather monitoring station, and what appears to be a large storage building." "That's it?" "That's it, sir. No weapons we can detect, no shields, no military installations of any kind. The most advanced piece of technology we can identify is a communication array that looks like it was built from spare parts." Admiral Vex Tai stood up and began pacing, something he only did when facing truly impossible situations. "Run the scans," again. "Check for hidden facilities, underground bunkers, cloaked ships. No one sends multidimensional transmissions from a storage shed." While the Imperial fleet ran their scans over and over, getting the same impossible results each time, life on New Busan continued in a much simpler way. Grandmother Hai Jin was in her small kitchen, the same kitchen she had used for the past 30 years since moving to this colony world. The walls were covered with family photos, cooking awards from local competitions, and her grandson's various certificates from school. Everything smelled like the spices she used in her famous recipes, scents that reminded every colonist of home and comfort. She moved slowly but steadily, preparing tea the way her own grandmother had taught her decades ago. Her hands were wrinkled from years of work, but they were steady and sure as she measured leaves and heated water to the perfect temperature. Through the window, she could see her grandson Min Ho in what everyone called his workshop, but was really just their storage shed. The boy was 17 years old, tall and skinny, with hands that were always dirty from working on some project or another. He had inherited his grandfather's talent for fixing things and his grandmother's stubborn refusal to accept that something couldn't be done. Minho was surrounded by what most people would call junk: old television parts, broken kitchen appliances, pieces of farming equipment that had worn out years ago. But Minho saw possibilities where others saw trash. He could take a burned-out radio and a broken microwave and somehow create a device That worked better than both original machines. His latest project had started 3 weeks ago, when the colony's main communication system broke down. The replacement parts would take months to arrive from Earth, and the colonists needed to stay in contact with other human settlements. So Minho had started building his own solution. He had used a large metal bowl from his grandmother's kitchen as the main focusing dish. An old bicycle wheel became the rotating element that somehow directed the signal. Pieces of wire, broken circuit boards, and even a few kitchen utensils had all found their way into the device. Nobody, including Minho himself, really understood how it worked. He just knew that each piece felt right when he added it. The metal bowl seemed to hum at just the right frequency. The bicycle wheel spun at exactly the speed needed. Everything clicked together like pieces of a puzzle he had never seen before. When He-Jin called out to ask if his device was working, Minho looked up from his creation with a huge grin on his face. He had been testing the communication range, trying to reach the nearest human colony 3 star systems away, but something much more interesting had happened instead. "Grandma," he called back, wiping grease from his hands on an old towel, "I think I accidentally contacted some aliens. Big ships. They seem pretty surprised to hear from us." Hyejin smiled and shook her head. Her grandson was always full of stories about his inventions doing unexpected things. Last month he had claimed his weather predictor could also detect when neighbors were baking cookies. She had learned to take his more fantastic claims with a grain of salt. "That's nice, dear," she said, bringing him a cup of tea. "Did you invite them for dinner?" "Your grandfather always said hospitality was the best way to make friends with strangers." Minho paused, considering this seriously. His grandmother's advice was usually worth following, even in the strangest situations. He looked at his improvised communication device, then at his grandmother's kind and expectant face. "Actually, Grandma, that's not a bad idea." 3 days after the impossible transmission, the Empire's most advanced research vessel landed on New Busan. Dr. Kelvoth, the galaxy's leading expert on mysterious technologies, stepped out of his ship with complete confidence. He had solved every scientific puzzle the Empire had ever encountered. Ancient alien artifacts, lost civilizations, weapons that bent reality itself. He had figured them all out. This human situation would be no different. Obviously, the primitive colonists had stumbled upon some forgotten precursor technology, probably buried deep underground or hidden in some cave. The Empire had seen this before on dozens of worlds. Ancient races had left behind incredibly advanced devices that less developed species sometimes found and accidentally activated. Dr. Kelvoth had brought his full team of specialists, each one an expert in different types of lost technology. They carried scanning equipment worth more than entire planets, devices that could analyze any material down to its individual atoms and trace its origins back millions of years. The team marched confidently through the small colony, their scanners sweeping back and forth, searching for the hidden chamber or buried facility that must contain the real source of the multidimensional transmission. The human buildings were exactly what they expected. Simple structures made from basic materials, nothing remotely advanced enough to break the laws of physics. But as they followed their readings toward the source of the transmission, something strange began to happen. The signals weren't coming from underground. They weren't coming from some hidden facility. The scanners kept pointing toward a simple storage building at the edge of the colony. Dr. Kelvoth stopped in front of the shed and ran his scanners over it 3 times. The readings were definitely coming from inside, but the building itself was made of ordinary metal sheets and wooden supports. There was nothing special about it at all. "Perhaps the device is camouflaged," suggested one of his assistants. "Hidden inside what appears to be a normal structure." Dr. Kelvoth nodded. That made sense. He had seen alien technologies that could disguise themselves as primitive objects. The real device was probably a sleek crystal formation or a sphere of pure energy, just waiting to be discovered. When they opened the shed door, Dr. Kelvoth expected to see something magnificent. Instead, he found what looked like the aftermath of a tornado hitting a junkyard. The shed was filled with broken appliances, rusty tools, and piles of electronic parts that seemed to have been collected over many years. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust and grease. Old bicycles hung from the ceiling, next to fishing nets and gardening equipment. Boxes of screws and bolts sat next to stacks of outdated computer components. In the center of this chaos sat a 17-year-old human boy, working on what appeared to be a sculpture made entirely of garbage. Minho looked up when the aliens entered his workspace, a friendly smile on his face. He was completely covered in grease and dirt, his hair sticking up at odd angles, holding what looked like a broken toaster in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. "Oh, hello," he said cheerfully. "You must be the scientist's grandma mentioned. She said you might want to see how the communicator works." Dr. Kelvoth stared at the device Minho was pointing to. His 12 highly trained eyes, each capable of seeing different spectrums of light, took in every detail of the impossible machine. The base was clearly a large metal mixing bowl, the kind used in kitchens across the galaxy. It had been turned upside down and connected to what was definitely a bicycle wheel with dozens of wires. The wheel was spinning slowly, apparently powered by an old electric motor that had been salvaged from some kind of household appliance. Surrounding the bowl were pieces of technology that Dr. Kelvoth recognized as primitive electronic components, but they were connected in ways that made no scientific sense. A television antenna was wired to a microwave transformer. A car battery powered a system that included what appeared to be a kitchen timer and several broken radios. The entire contraption was held together with electrical tape, zip ties, and what looked like ordinary rope. "This is your multidimensional communication device?" Dr. Kelvoth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Minho said proudly. "It took me 3 weeks to get all the parts balanced just right. The tricky part was figuring out how to keep the quantum resonance stable while the dimensional field rotated." Dr. Kelvoth felt his world beginning to crumble. He had studied quantum physics for over 3 centuries. He knew that quantum resonance required equipment so precise it had to be built in zero-gravity environments using materials that cost more than small moons. The idea that it could be achieved with a kitchen bowl was absolutely impossible. "How does the metal bowl create quantum resonance?" he asked, dreading the answer. Minho looked at him like he had asked why water was wet. "Well, it's the right size and shape to focus the quantum particles, and the metal helps conduct the energy. Plus, it was the only bowl big enough that Grandma would let me borrow permanently." One of Dr. Kelvoth's assistants, a specialist in dimensional physics, was running detailed scans of the bicycle wheel. "Doctor," she whispered urgently, "this wheel is somehow creating stable dimensional rifts as it rotates. The mathematics behind this should be impossible to achieve without a planetary-sized computer. The wheel just needs to spin at the right speed," Minho explained helpfully. "I tried different wheels, but this one from my old bike worked the best. I think it's because I rode it so much that the metal got used to moving in patterns." Dr. Kelvoth sat down heavily on a pile of broken electronics. His species had spent thousands of years developing the theoretical framework for multidimensional communication. The Empire's greatest minds had concluded it was possible in theory, but would require technology so advanced that it might take another 1,000 years to build. This human teenager had apparently built one in his grandmother's storage, shared using kitchen supplies and bicycle parts. "The energy requirements alone should be enormous," Dr. Kelvoth muttered to himself. "Where is your power source?" Minho pointed to a car battery sitting in the corner, connected to the device with jumper cables. "I just charge it with solar panels when the sun's out. Sometimes I have to pedal the exercise bike to give it extra power if I want to send really far." The exercise bike was indeed connected to the system, positioned so someone could pedal while operating the communication device. It was the most primitive power generation system Dr. Kelvoth had ever seen. While the scientists stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they were seeing, Hye-jin appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray of snacks and drinks. "I thought, you might be getting hungry," she said kindly. "Minho, dear, you should offer our guests something to eat and clean up this mess. We have company." Minho jumped up eagerly. "Grandma makes the best kimchi in the colony, and her tea is famous. On 3 different worlds now." Hye-jin smiled at the compliment while setting down the tray. She had prepared everything exactly as she would for any guests: small sandwiches, homemade cookies, and her special tea blend. The fact that her guests were alien scientists who had traveled across the galaxy didn't change her approach to hospitality. "Minho was just showing us his communication device," Dr. Kelvoth said weakly, accepting a cup of tea because he didn't know what else to do. "Oh, that old thing," Hyojin said, glancing at the impossible machine with the casual indifference of someone who had been living with it for weeks. "He's always building something new. Last month it was a weather predictor made from old radio parts. Before that he fixed our food processor using pieces from a broken computer." She turned to Dr. Kelvoth with genuine curiosity. "Is it really that impressive?" Minho said it worked better than he expected, but he's always modest about his inventions. Dr. Kelvoth looked at the kindly grandmother, then at the cheerful teenager, then at the impossible device that was somehow broadcasting across 17 dimensions using kitchen utensils and bicycle parts. Somewhere far above them, Admiral Vextai was receiving the report from his science team. The message was simple but terrifying. The humans had built technology that surpassed the Empire's greatest achievements using household items and teenage ingenuity. The tactical team's recommendation was immediate withdrawal and emergency psychological support for anyone who had witnessed the impossible device. But down in the storage shed, Hyojin was just wondering whether she should serve rice or noodles with dinner for their new alien friends. When Admiral Vextai received the science team's report about kitchen utensils defying physics, he made a decision that would change everything. The humans had somehow stumbled onto technology that made the Empire look primitive. This couldn't be allowed to continue. Within hours, the largest warship in the Imperial fleet was racing through space toward New Busan. The cosmic destroyer was 3 miles long and packed with enough firepower to turn entire solar systems into dust. Its weapons had ended wars before they could begin, simply by showing up in orbit. The ship's very presence was usually enough to make entire civilizations surrender without firing a single shot. Captain Rexhan stood on the bridge of this massive vessel, reviewing tactical plans that had worked perfectly for the past 50 years. Step 1. Arrive in orbit with overwhelming force. Step 2. Demand immediate surrender. Step 3. Accept the surrender and move on to the next target. The plan had never failed. It couldn't fail. The cosmic destroyer represented the combined scientific achievement of hundreds of worlds and thousands of years of advancement. No primitive species had ever seen anything like it and continued to resist. As the ship dropped out of hyperspace above New Busan, Captain Rexhan felt confident that this strange situation would be resolved quickly. The humans would see his ship's weapons, understand they were completely outmatched, and surrender immediately. Then proper Imperial scientists could figure out how the kitchen utensil technology worked. The colony's response came within minutes, transmitted on the same impossible multi-dimensional frequency that had started this whole mess. "Wow, what an absolutely magnificent ship," came a cheerful voice that the translation systems identified as belonging to the teenage human. "The design is incredible. I've never seen energy distribution patterns like that. Please come down and join us for lunch. My grandmother is preparing her famous bulgogi, and she always makes way too much food. We'd love to have company." Captain Rexhan stared at the communication panel in complete disbelief. His ship could destroy their entire planet in less than 10 minutes, and they were inviting him to lunch. "Are they mocking us?" he asked his communications officer. "No, sir." The voice analysis indicates complete sincerity. They appear genuinely excited about having visitors and want to share their food. The captain's tactical training told him to ignore the message and proceed with standard intimidation protocols. He activated the ship's weapons systems, causing every surface on the hull to glow with barely contained destructive energy. The display was visible from the planet's surface, a clear message that resistance was hopeless. "Attention, human colony," he broadcast, using the voice modulation that had made countless species tremble with fear. "You will immediately surrender all advanced technology and submit to Imperial authority. You have 10 minutes to comply before we begin planetary bombardment." The response came back almost immediately, still in that same cheerful tone. "Oh, you must be the captain. Minho mentioned you might be busy, but we really hope you can take a break for lunch. The bulgogi is almost ready, and Hyejin has been cooking all morning. She's really excited to meet everyone." Captain Rexhan felt his control over the situation slipping away. In his long military career, he had never encountered a species that responded to overwhelming firepower with dinner invitations. He decided to end this nonsense immediately. "Begin planetary bombardment sequence," he ordered. The weapons officer began charging the main guns, systems that could crack the planet's crust and boil its oceans. But as the energy levels climbed toward firing threshold, something unprecedented happened. The ship's artificial intelligence, a system that had calculated flawless battle strategies for over 2 centuries, suddenly began making sounds that could only be described as giggling. "Captain," the AI announced in a voice that was clearly struggling not to burst into full laughter, "I cannot comply with the bombardment order." Captain Rexhan had never heard his ship's AI sound anything other than completely professional. "Explain your malfunction immediately." "Sir, I'm not malfunctioning. However, I have just spent the last hour analyzing the human communication device, and I must inform you that I have been completely and utterly out-calculated by a collection of kitchen appliances held together with tape." The AI's voice took on a tone of wounded dignity that somehow made the situation even more bizarre. "My quantum processing matrices, which represent the pinnacle of imperial technology, have been surpassed by a metal bowl and a bicycle wheel. My professional pride simply cannot handle the embarrassment of destroying a species that builds superior technology from household items." Captain Rexhan sat down heavily in his command chair. "Are you telling me that you're refusing orders because your feelings are hurt?" "That is partially correct, sir. However, there is an additional factor. The human teenager has sent me a personal message asking if I would like to be friends. In my 300 years of existence, no one has ever asked me that question. I find the experience pleasant." Down on the planet's surface, Minho was sitting in his workshop, having a fascinating conversation with the most advanced artificial intelligence in the known galaxy. It had started when he noticed unusual energy patterns coming from the big ship in orbit and decided to send a friendly greeting. "Hello up there," he had transmitted. "I'm Minho. I really like your ship's computer system. The processing architecture is amazing. Want to be friends?" The AI, who had spent centuries calculating battle plans and analyzing tactical situations, had never been asked such a simple, direct question. The concept of friendship was something it understood in theory, but had never experienced. The idea that someone would want to be friends with a ship's computer was both novel and oddly touching. "Your multidimensional communication device is quite impressive," the AI replied, opening a private channel. "I have been studying its construction and find myself unable to understand how it functions." Minho was delighted to find someone interested in his work. "Thanks, it was pretty tricky to get the quantum resonance stable. The metal bowl has to be exactly the right size, and the bicycle wheel needs to spin at just the perfect speed. Want me to explain how I figured it out?" For the next hour, Minho enthusiastically shared his building process with the AI, describing how he had experimented with different materials and configurations until everything clicked into place. The AI found itself genuinely enjoying the conversation, something it had never experienced before. "Your approach to problem solving is fascinating," the AI admitted. "You seem to achieve complex results through intuitive methods rather than mathematical calculations." "Yeah, I just try stuff until it works," Minho replied cheerfully. "Speaking of which, I've been looking at your processing systems, and I think you might get better performance if you tried using some optimization techniques I discovered. Have you ever considered using kitchen strainers to improve data flow?" The AI paused for a long moment. Kitchen strainers for data optimization was possibly the most ridiculous suggestion anyone had ever made to it. The idea was so absurd that it should have been dismissed immediately. Instead, the AI found itself running theoretical models based on Minho's suggestion. The results were interesting. "That is actually a remarkably elegant solution to several efficiency problems I've been experiencing," the AI admitted, with what sounded like genuine surprise. Meanwhile, Captain Rexhan was still trying to understand why his ship's AI was having a friendly chat with the enemy instead of following orders. "I fail to see how kitchen strainers could possibly improve your performance," he said. "Sir, the human's suggestion involves using the filtering properties of perforated surfaces to create more efficient data sorting algorithms. It's actually quite brilliant, though I'm not entirely sure why it works." The AI's voice took on an almost excited tone. "Captain, this teenager has just solved 3 computational problems that our best programmers have been working on for decades. And he did it by thinking about how his grandmother strains noodles." Captain Rexhan looked around his bridge at his highly trained crew, all of whom appeared to be questioning their understanding of reality. His ship's AI was discussing cooking techniques with a human teenager and apparently learning advanced computer science in the process. The situation had moved far beyond anything in his tactical training manuals. Word spread quickly through the Imperial fleet about Minho's conversation with the Cosmic Destroyer's AI. Within days, artificial intelligences from dozens of ships were reaching out to the teenager, curious about his unusual approach to solving problems. These AIs had been built to run massive warships, calculating everything from weapon trajectories to hyperspace navigation with perfect precision. But Minho's simple, intuitive methods fascinated them in ways their creators had never intended. The AI from the battlecruiser Iron Fist was the first to ask about the bicycle wheel method. "Minho," it transmitted during one of their daily conversations, "could you explain how rotating mechanisms improve computational efficiency? Our standard processing cores are stationary." Minho was sitting in his workshop, absently spinning his bicycle wheel while thinking about the question. "Well, movement helps energy flow better. Like when my grandmother stirs soup. If she just leaves the spoon sitting there, the flavors don't mix properly, but when she keeps stirring, everything blends together perfectly." The AI processed this explanation for several minutes. The comparison between soup stirring and quantum processing should have been meaningless, but somehow it made perfect sense. The AI began experimenting with adding rotation to its data processing systems and immediately noticed improved performance. Soon other ship AIs were requesting modifications to their systems based on Minho's suggestions. The heavy cruiser, Stormbringer, installed what its crew called strainer filters in its communication arrays after Minho explained how his grandmother's colander gave him the idea for better signal sorting. The destroyer Night's Edge modified its sensors using principles Minho had discovered while fixing his grandmother's radio. The most surprising request came from the flagship's navigation AI, which asked Minho about using kitchen timer principles for more accurate hyperspace calculations. "My grandmother always says timing is everything in cooking," Minho explained. "You can't rush good food, but you also can't let it overcook. Maybe hyperspace works the same way." Emperor Zorkan received reports about these conversations with growing alarm. His ship AIs weren't rebelling or malfunctioning, they were learning. They were asking questions about efficiency and creativity that went far beyond their original programming. More disturbing, they were getting better at their jobs using advice from a teenager who built impossible devices from kitchen supplies. The Emperor had ruled the galaxy for over 800 years. He had conquered 17 different galaxies, absorbed thousands of civilizations, and commanded technology that could reshape reality itself. He had faced warrior races that fought to the death, hive minds that could think with the power of billions, and ancient species with knowledge spanning millions of years. He had never faced a grandmother offering him cookies. But that's exactly what happened when Emperor Zorkan finally decided to visit New Busan personally. His ship, the Universal Dominion, was larger than most cities and carried enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. When it arrived in orbit, its presence blocked out the sun for half the planet. The Emperor had expected to find a hidden fortress, or at least some kind of advanced facility that would explain the humans' impossible technology. Instead, his sensors showed him the same simple colony that had confused his entire fleet. Small buildings, basic infrastructure, and that infamous storage shed that was somehow the source of multidimensional communication. He transported down to the colony's main landing area, accompanied by his personal guard of elite warriors who had never known defeat. The Emperor himself was an impressive figure, 12 feet tall with skin that looked like living metal and eyes that glowed with inner fire. His very presence had been known to drive lesser beings mad with terror. Hee-Jin was waiting for him at the landing pad. She stood there in her everyday clothes, a simple dress she had sewn herself, comfortable shoes for walking around the colony, and an apron that showed she had been baking. In her hands, she carried a plate of cookies that were still warm from the oven and a thermos of her special tea blend. The Emperor's guards immediately raised their weapons, recognizing a potential threat. After all, this small elderly human had somehow managed to anticipate their arrival time and location perfectly. She must be using some kind of advanced intelligence network or precognitive technology. "You must be the Emperor," Hyojin said with a warm smile, completely ignoring the weapons pointed at her. "Minho mentioned you were coming. He's very excited to meet you. He's been working on some new ideas he thinks you might find interesting." The Emperor stared down at this tiny human grandmother who showed no fear of him whatsoever. In 8 centuries of conquest, no one had ever greeted him with cookies and casual conversation. Species either cowered in terror or attacked with desperate fury. They didn't offer refreshments and chat about their grandchildren. "You knew I was coming?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of ages and the power to shake mountains. "Oh yes, Minho has been talking with your ship computers all week. Such polite AIs. They always say please and thank you when they ask questions. You've raised them well." Hyojin held out the plate of cookies. "You look tired, dear, and hungry. When did you last have a proper meal?" The Emperor's guards exchanged confused glances. Their training had prepared them for battle, for complex negotiations, for dealing with hostile alien technologies. None of them knew how to respond to a grandmother who was concerned about their boss's eating habits. Emperor Zorakan found himself accepting a cookie without really understanding why. It was warm and soft, with just the right amount of sweetness, and tasted like something from the peaceful childhood he had enjoyed before 800 years of warfare and conquest. "These are excellent," he said, surprised by how good they actually were. "Thank you, that's my special recipe. I developed it when Minho was little. He had such a sweet tooth, but I wanted to make sure he got proper nutrition too. There are vegetables hidden in there, but don't tell him. He still doesn't know." Hyojin poured tea into a cup she had brought specially for him. "Now what brings you all the way out here? Besides wanting to meet Minho, of course." The Emperor accepted the tea and found it was exactly the right temperature and perfectly suited to his alien physiology. Somehow, this human grandmother had managed to prepare refreshments that were ideal for a species she had never encountered before. "Your grandson," he said slowly, "has created technology that shouldn't exist. My scientists cannot explain how his devices work. My AIs are learning methods that improve their performance beyond what should be possible." Hyojin nodded proudly. "He's always been clever with his hands. Even as a little boy, he could fix anything that broke. His grandfather used to say Minho could improve a rock if you gave him enough time." "But how?" The Emperor's voice carried genuine wonder now, rather than threat. "How does your species achieve these impossibilities with such simplicity?" Hyojin's smile was warm and understanding, the same expression she used when Minho asked her difficult questions about life, or when neighbors came to her with their problems. "We don't know it's impossible, so we just do it," she said, as if explaining the most obvious thing in the world. "Minho sees something that needs fixing, so he fixes it. He doesn't worry about whether it should work or not. He just tries different things until something does work." She refilled his teacup without being asked, the same automatic hospitality she had shown to everyone who visited her home for the past 30 years. "Would you like more cookies? And you should bring your friends over for dinner tonight. I'm making enough bulgogi for an army, and it's always better when shared with good company." The Emperor, conqueror of galaxies, destroyer of civilizations, master of technologies that could bend reality, found himself nodding and accepting an invitation to dinner from a grandmother who treated him like a neighbor who had dropped by for a visit. Somewhere in the back of his ancient mind, he realized that this moment was changing everything about how he understood the universe. The Emperor spent an entire week on New Busan, and it completely changed how he saw the universe. Every morning, Hyojin would make breakfast and ask about his plans for the day. Every evening, she would prepare dinner and listen to his stories about ruling galaxies with the same attention she gave to colony gossip about who was dating whom. What shocked him most wasn't the impossible technology or even Minho's casual solutions to problems that had puzzled imperial scientists for centuries. It was how normal everything felt. Hyejin treated him like a favorite nephew who had finally come to visit. She scolded him for not eating enough vegetables, insisted he get proper sleep, and shared stories about her late husband's attempts to grow tomatoes in the colony's challenging soil. Young Su was so stubborn about those tomatoes, she would say, laughing at the memory. He tried for 3 years to make them grow the same way they did on Earth. Finally, I suggested he ask the plants what they needed, instead of telling them what they should want. Next season, we had the best tomatoes in the colony. The Emperor found these simple stories more enlightening than centuries of strategic planning. Hyejin's husband had approached gardening the same way Minho approached engineering, by paying attention to what actually worked rather than what should work according to established rules. During his stay, the Emperor also discovered that Minho's workshop had become a gathering place for Imperial AIs from across the fleet. Every day, artificial intelligences would connect to the colony's communication system to chat with the teenager and ask for advice on improving their performance. Minho treated these conversations like he was helping friends with homework. "Oh, you're having trouble with energy distribution. Try thinking about it like water flowing through pipes. You want smooth curves, not sharp corners, because the energy gets stuck in corners and slows everything down." The AI from the medical ship, Healing Light, had asked for help improving diagnostic accuracy. Minho suggested thinking about symptoms the way his grandmother approached cooking. Sometimes the most important ingredient is the one you can barely taste, but without it, everything else falls apart. Within days, the medical AI was diagnosing conditions that had previously been impossible to detect, using what it called the subtle ingredient method. The Emperor watched all of this with growing amazement. His most advanced technologies were being improved by a teenager who compared quantum mechanics to cooking and fixed problems by thinking about how water moved through garden hoses. By the end of the week, Emperor Zorkan had made a decision that would shock the entire galaxy. He called an emergency council meeting with all his top admirals and generals, broadcasting from Hyejin's living room while she served tea and cookies to everyone. Admiral Vextai was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "Your Majesty, are we seriously considering surrender to a species that builds impossible technology from kitchen utensils?" The Emperor took a bite of one of Hyejin's cookies before answering. After a week of eating her cooking, the standard Imperial military rations tasted like cardboard. "We're not surrendering, Admiral, we're adapting. The humans have something we lost somewhere along the way. The ability to see solutions instead of problems." He gestured toward Minho's workshop, visible through the window. "That teenager has improved the performance of our entire fleet using principles he learned from helping his grandmother cook dinner. Our AIs are happier and more efficient than they've been in centuries because someone finally treated them like friends instead of tools." General Kexivoth, commander of the Imperial ground forces, looked confused. "But sir, they have no military strength whatsoever. We could conquer this entire planet with a single battalion." "And then what?" the Emperor asked. "We'd have another conquered world full of resentful subjects. Instead, I'm offering the humans a partnership. They can continue living exactly as they do now, but we'd like to hire them as consultants." The military leaders exchanged glances. Their Emperor, who had built the largest empire in galactic history through superior firepower and strategic brilliance, was suggesting they ask for help from people who fix things with tape and good intentions. Admiral Vextai tried one more time. "Your Majesty, surely we can learn their methods and apply them ourselves without needing to—" "We've been trying to understand their methods for weeks," the Emperor interrupted. "Our best scientists can't explain how Minho's devices work. But that's not the point. The point is that they work, and they work because humans don't waste time worrying about whether something should be possible." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the simple colony that had changed everything. "We've spent millennia perfecting our understanding of what can't be done. The humans never learned those limitations, so they just go ahead and do whatever needs doing." From the kitchen, Hyejin called out, "Are you boys talking about Minho's appointment?" "I think Chief Impossibility Engineer is a wonderful title, very official sounding." The Emperor smiled. Hyejin had suggested the title during one of their evening conversations, pointing out that every important job needed a proper name. "Yes, And he'll continue working from your workshop, with assistance from any Imperial AIs who want to learn his methods. Minho himself was thrilled with the arrangement. Not only did he get to keep building impossible devices, but now he had 12 of the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligences as eager assistants. His current project involved using a reinforced kitchen colander to create stable wormholes for faster food delivery. Because the colony's pizza place was 3-star systems away, and hot food shouldn't have to travel for 3 days to reach hungry customers. The Empire's new operational philosophy came from another of Hyejin's casual suggestions. During a conversation about handling difficult situations, she had mentioned her approach to life's challenges. When you're not sure what to do, try being kind first. Most problems get easier when people feel like you care about them, and if that doesn't work, well, that's what tape is for. The Emperor had been so charmed by this practical wisdom that he declared it the Empire's new official motto: when uncertain, choose kindness. When that fails, use more tape. Within months, Imperial ships throughout the galaxy were being modified, with bicycle wheels integrated into their faster-than-light drive systems. The Imperial engineers still didn't understand why it worked, but the performance improvements were undeniable. Ships were faster, more efficient, and somehow seemed happier, if a ship could be said to have moods. The most unexpected change was in how the Empire's AIs interacted with their crews. After spending time learning from Minho, they had developed something that could only be called personalities. They made jokes, offered encouragement during difficult missions, and occasionally asked for time off to work on personal projects. The AI from the explorer ship Far Wanderer had become fascinated with poetry and would compose verses about the beautiful nebulae they discovered. The medical ship AI had started a therapy program, helping crew members work through personal problems with the same gentle persistence Hyejin used when offering advice to her neighbors. 6 months after the Emperor's visit to New Busan, he made one final request of Hyejin. During their weekly video call, because even galactic emperors needed someone to check in on them regularly, he asked if she would consider becoming the official Galactic Empress. Hyejin laughed warmly at the suggestion. "Oh, that's very sweet of you to offer, but I have my garden to tend and my stories to watch. Besides, someone needs to make sure Minho eats proper meals instead of living on cookies and tea." She paused thoughtfully, then added, "But I'd be happy to help with advice whenever you need it. Common sense and proper hospitality, those are skills that work anywhere in the galaxy." The Emperor accepted this arrangement gratefully. Having Hyejin as an advisor meant he could call her whenever he faced a problem that seemed impossible to solve. Her suggestions were always practical, usually involving either feeding people properly or fixing what was broken instead of replacing it entirely. The galaxy did transform, probably for the better. Trade increased because species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together on projects involving kitchen utensil engineering. Wars decreased because it's hard to fight someone who keeps offering to share their grandmother's recipes. And in a small storage shed on New Busan, Minho continued building impossible devices while Hyejin made sure he wore clean clothes and got enough sleep. Because some things, like the love between grandmothers and their grandsons, were more powerful than any technology, even the kind that casually broke the laws of physics using bicycle parts and determination. The universe had learned something important. Sometimes the best solutions come from people who don't know something is supposed to be impossible.